Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. I am Donna Stone, I'm the president of Project Bold Life, and I'm here with Maggie Mistal. Her YouTube video, How to Ace Your Job Interview, has more than 5 million views. CNN has dubbed her as one of the nation's best known career coaches, and she has been quoted on the New York Times, the New York Post, Washington Post, USA Today, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, on and on. Maggie, it is so great to have you here today.
Donna, I think everybody should have their bio read. No matter, everybody has achievements, and it just feels so good here. So excited to be here just for that alone.
Oh, it's so great to have you. So let's talk about this video first. You did a video on how to ace your job interview, and more than 5 million views. Can you just, I know you can't tell us everything that was in that video, but can you just give us 1 or 2 big tips that came out of that for people and why so many people watched it?
Well, I'll tell you, I think the first tip I share in that video, and I'm giving it away a bit, but it's still a helpful one, is just to smile, because the interview has become such a pressurized situation for most people that they walk in so serious. And I say, you know what, just relax and smile. Remember that it's another human being that you're talking to, and don't get so caught up in the evaluation that is this interview. And that leads me to the second tip, which is that it's not a popularity contest. You're not trying to get them to like you, although that's what most people approach it. How do I say the right answer? I'm like, it's not about the right answer, it's about the right fit between you and the job. And you're there evaluating them just as much as they are evaluating you in terms of that fit, that really needs to be the goal. Right. So 2 tips, there's more in there, but those are my favorites.
Well, I love it because the smile one, you don't even think about, right? Everybody tends to be so nervous going in to an interview that they forget about like the normal thing of you're meeting someone for the first time, and maybe you should
maybe
be
make a new friend.
Exactly,
you know, you and I met in an interview setting, and look at us today.
Yes, we did. That's so funny. So let me ask you, how did you decide on your career? I mean, to be a career coach, right? Was it something that you knew all along, or how did it come to be?
No, I did not know. I have to say, I think that's why I'm a coach, because I've also been through what I coach people through. I know how it feels. No, I was an accounting major out of school. All I knew growing up was that I grew up with a lot of entrepreneurs in the family. And I love the fact that they had time freedom, and then they had control over their income. It just looked like, well, that's the kind of lifestyle I want to have. I took accounting in college because it's like, well, it's good business. And I thought, business, yes, that sounds like what I like. But it really turned out to not have the time freedom. It had the financial piece, which was nice, but it still was lacking. And it was only until I went through my own soul search that I really started to, instead of shoehorning myself into what's out there, really start to define what makes me happy. And then I realized it's not just business, I want to be my own boss.
Right.
And some of my bosses can attest to that, because I was not the easiest employee.
Oh no.
That's another key sign.
So what do you do when someone comes to you and they are trying to find their passion, right? Not just find a job, but try to find a job they're passionate about. Like, how do you talk to them about finding that passion?
They already have it. Most people think it's some separate thing they have to quest for, or it's something they have to ask people, what should I do? I can't stand it when people ask that question. I'm like, don't do that. Don't ask other people. The answers are within you, and there's some really key ways you can figure that out. You can look to what we call times of ecstatic engagement. Times when you felt your best, your happiest, you lost track of time and what you were doing, and you were just in the flow. It wasn't a struggle. Most people think, oh, that was just a cool experience. I'm like, no, that was a key to your career path.
Right.
That's a sign that there's something you're really enjoying and they're good at that comes so easily to you. It doesn't happen that way for everybody. And that's another key piece, is to look at what people thank you for. Because even when we're little kids, we tend to have, again, talents and abilities that show up. I know now as a parent, you can start to see some of those. But you really, when you start to look at what do people thank you for, you start to notice where you're being of service. And that's another key piece of a passionate, ideal career.
So if somebody is coming to you, and because a lot of times I'm assuming they're coming to you and maybe they're not even in the right career, right? So sometimes somebody will come to you and you might say, hey, it's time to change a job. Sometimes you may say, hey, it's time to change your career. Like, how do you know when it's time for someone, if they're unhappy, that it's maybe just the job, or it's truly an entire career they maybe need to change?
Well, I'll tell you, it's interesting because motivation really plays into it. If you've been unmotivated in your job for a long time and you've tried to change, that's what I tried to do. I tried to change. I started in accounting, went to management consulting, went to organizational psychology, all within the same firm. Right? 7 years, 3 different cities, 3 different departments within the same company. I still was like, this isn't it. So my motivation was lacking that whole time. And I was also complaining. That's another key sign. If people around you are tired of hearing you complain, It's that's what really did it for me. There was a book called Zen and the Art of Making a Living that my then boyfriend, now husband, had read, and he gave it to me and said, maybe you should check this out. He's very polite and nice. And I'm reading it, and the chapter where it says about complaining, he had written my initials next to it. And that was it. I said, oh my God, this is starting to seep into my personal relationships. And this is all I talked about, was how unhappy I was.
Now, did you realize that before he pointed it out?
No. I just thought I was the victim of a bad career. Right? Which is how it feels. You feel like, if they would just change, then I could be happy.
Everything
but when
I
realized it wasn't everybody else that needed to change, it was me that really needed to figure out, okay, Maggie, so if you're not happy in this, why don't you tell us what's going to make you happy?
Right.
And that's what I had to do.
Now, that's scary though, right? So I have a lot of friends that, took time off out of the workforce to raise their kids, and they are just now thinking about, I want to get back into the workforce, start my career again. Do you have a lot of people that you talk to that are trying to get back in, and what kind of advice would you give to a mom who's finally ready to go back but now is kind of scared to do so?
Yeah, there are a lot of people who are returning to work, men and women now too. We don't just have moms, we have some dads who've taken time off.
That's true.
And what I tell them, number one, is stop apologizing for taking time off, okay? I'm a mom, and it's a real job.
Yeah.
With real skills.
Yeah.
And whether you're managing, organizing, motivating, influencing without authority, there's a lot of stuff though that goes into being a good parent that also makes you a good employee.
Yeah.
And I think it's time for people to stop feeling bad for taking time off and start noticing that there are so much transferable skills that they haven't been off. They've just been in a different role, a different job. For that time, and that job is really of service, and especially if their kids are doing well, that parent is the main reason that's the case. So I tell people too to look for back to work programs, because a lot of employers I love the fact that these folks have a foundation in the business and now they can come back in. There are employers sponsoring back to work programs. There are universities sponsoring back to work programs. So if there is a technology you need to be up on, or you feel out of it in terms of different trends, take one of these programs, because it'll actually reinforce what you know, as opposed to focusing on what you feel you don't know.
Right. I love that too, because I think so many of these women are so talented, and men, like you said, now there's more men staying home watching the children as well, but so many of my friends, my female friends, are so talented, and they're so nervous about getting back in, and I'm like, don't be nervous. Like, any company will be lucky to have you, but it's a scary thing.
It's a misconception too. I think they think everybody in corporate is up on everything, and they're not. And I'm
Not
like,
at all.
really? I know, like, it's not really. Not that people aren't trying, but literally, if they even, and this is a tip for the moms or dads who are still not ready to go back, just network with those colleagues. Just go to lunch once a month. Make sure you're connecting with the corporate world, and then you won't feel so separate. You'll actually realize, hey, I'm still pretty up on things. It hasn't changed.
Right. So you work a lot with corporate executives. I mean, I know you work with all different levels of individuals, but corporate executives is one of them. What do you think is one or two traits of a great leader? Like when you see these executives that are truly great leaders?
Well, I'll tell you, the thing that differentiates it in my experience, and even in study, because when I did take organizational psychology as a job, I took as classes as well, it's the idea of the leader as servant. So that's whole servant leadership aspect, to me, is really ground shifting in the executive space, because I grew up in some situations. I've luckily had some really great bosses, and then the ones I struggled with. And in the situations where I struggled, and I wasn't the only one struggling, the bosses saw me as the servant, right? It was cracking the whip. It was telling me how to do the job.
Right.
It was, giving me the goal and blaming me if I didn't get there, right? I'm the problem.
Right.
The obstacles are my fault. When I've worked for servant leaders who saw their role as to serve me in terms of, and all the other folks on the staff, to be successful, it was a completely different environment. I could thrive. I felt like safe and protected. I could take risks that were smart. I felt like they were removing obstacles for me that I couldn't remove. They could have been different authorities, different issues going on, political things that they needed to maneuver through, and they really paved the way and provided that safety net. And to me, that is a very important leadership quality that, especially today, it really plays out well. Our organizations are flatter. There's less formal responsibility in organizations, so that command and control approach doesn't work as well as this servant leadership idea.
I think you need to write a book.
I would love to. Actually, when I learned about servant leadership, I'm like, everybody needs to do this.
I'm
because
serious.
It's really the world we live in. Yeah.
No, I love that. So when people come to you and maybe they're in their job and they feel, tell me if this happens or not, but they maybe feel like they're not getting paid what they're worth. Like, is there any advice that you give them on figuring out what they're worth and then how to go ask for a raise. I know that makes people really nervous.
It does, and I think it's still this taboo in the workplace, you know. And I remember I happened to be talking to a recruiter at my friend's apartment, and I mentioned my salary, and she went through the roof, right? Because I was making more than her. I didn't know I was making more than her,
right?
And all of a sudden I was like, uh-oh, rift in the friendship, and I didn't know what to do. So there's this nervousness still around how do you talk about salary. Well, you do need to demystify it and find out if you're getting paid market value or not. That's the number one thing you need to do, especially if you feel underpaid. It can help, because if you look at market value and realize you're top of the range, then hey, all of a sudden you feel good about your job, right? So check out salary.com, check out payscale.com. Even Glassdoor has salary information, so you don't have to be in the dark. You can even fill out, from your geographic area, your job title, all kinds of stuff. Then if you do find you're underpaid, maybe at the lower end of that scale, you have to ask. Purely asking will make a big difference, because I've talked to managers, I've talked to leaders. They say, I'm going to give it to the person who asks. I'm not just going to proactively give money around, although that's nice. You're saying, I give it to the one who asks. So, and the other thing I learned with a negotiation expert is when you ask, yes, make your case, talk about the things you've done and achieved, talk about the great things your boss has said about you or others have said about you, have your case, but then stop talking. Okay, let them react. Don't keep running on and getting all nervous. Just say your case and then just let the boss
stop and let them talk.
That is let it sink in, because then it shows your seriousness.
That is great advice. I love that. And I always tell people, I do motivational talks, and one of the big things, like I think it's number 3 on my list, is ask for it, whatever it is. I'm not always talking about a raise. I'm just in general, if you want something, you want to work on a project, you want a raise, you want it, whatever it is. Gosh, why are so people scared?
It's outside the comfort zone, right? Because you feel like, what if they say no? Well, at least you asked. And usually they don't say no. They say, I'll consider that in 6 months or at the next salary review time, or let's revisit this. That's usually what my clients end up hearing. So I want people to know that they don't have to be scared that they're really going to get a flat out no. That's not usually what happens.
And you're no worse off usually. So, I mean, it's not going to be your worst.
They respect you more because you've made the case. And it's interesting. I mean, the other thing too, I've heard this about women versus men, is that women feel more comfortable negotiating on behalf of someone else. So if you're still nervous about that ask, man or woman, remember you're advocating not just on your behalf, but on behalf of your family, maybe on behalf of other coworkers who aren't speaking up, right? Think of if you need to realize that you're there for other people, you are. That's still part of it.
So you had said earlier that you've worked for all different types of bosses. How do you and how should other people deal with a difficult boss?
It's not easy. Where's that smile comment I made earlier? Just smile. Well, here's what I learned though. So we actually are bosses the way that we were fathered. I learned that from a gentleman who wrote a great book about it. And it opened my eyes, because again, that command and control kind of boss had a command and control kind of father or father figure in their life. And so I had a difficult boss at the time I learned this, and I thought, oh my gosh, I saw this person as a child going through this experience. I'm like, wow, it gave me compassion. And that's the other piece you need to have. You need to forgive and have compassion for that person, because chances are they are doing the best they can. I mean, this person was doing the best they can with what they had learned. And it, all of a sudden, just me relaxing about that and having compassion for that person changed the dynamic of the relationship. Because all of a sudden I stopped expecting different behavior from that person, and it went a long way. I think you can also, and I coach a lot of people to do this, you bring it up. You say, wow, I really want to have the best working relationship with you. Maybe it's just me. I could be wrong, but I've noticed some challenges. Are there ways I could be working better with you? And I've heard from managers, and they say, please open that door, because they don't know how to approach certain things. If maybe you're doing something, maybe it's you, maybe you're annoying them for some reason, and they feel bad saying it. Just open that door and say, please tell me if there's something I could be doing differently to work better. I'd love to.
And then they'll be more comfortable to tell you exactly.
It changes that you feel like the air shift, you know, because it's truly just two people like this. All of a sudden you can open your fist and start to work together.
Open the communication. Interesting. I was wondering, I know you talk to a lot of different people. What do you think personally about the new flexible work schedules? I mean, not everybody's doing them, but do you think they're good for companies? Do you think they're good for people? What are your thoughts on having more flexibility?
I think that companies could go further with giving people flexibility. It's one of the number one things I hear from folks when they're not happy, and they're willing to change careers, jobs, whatever they need to sometimes to get flexibility. What I think they need to also do though is not make it one size fits all. Because a lot of companies feel, and there's legal reasons why companies like to do that. I worked in HR, I get it. But you can put power in the manager's hands. The person who's working closely with that individual say, listen, you guys figure out what works. Here's the work we have to get done, and let's figure it out. Now, and maybe as a department then, you can roll some of that and say, what can we all do together? Because to throw hours at work, or at your job and think it's going to get more productivity, we know that's not happening.
No.
I also put it though on the employee, because a lot of people say they want flexibility, and I'll say, well, what do you mean? They're like, well,
Yeah.
So defining what is your ideal schedule.
Right.
Do it now. Don't wait for your company to offer flexibility. What if you could have anything? What would that look like? And I've had clients do this and then go into their boss and ask for it, and the boss has said yes. And you can even, if they're nervous, say, how about we pilot it for a month or two?
That's a great idea.
And then they feel more comfortable because they have an out if it doesn't work, and so do you.
Yep.
So you really don't even need a company-wide initiative to get flexibility. You just need to get clarity, and then you need to pilot it with your boss.
Right. Yeah, I love that. So you have, you're a mom, you have a job, you have an amazing podcast. Like, how do you manage it all? We always talk about work-life balance, but how do you manage it all, get it all done?
Well, it helps to do workshops about working smarter, not harder, because I can't give advice that I don't take, right? And there's always new research, right? So I did recently do one of those in the last year, and I learned a lot about how our brains work. And a lot of the traditional way we've grown up working is not very much in line with our brains, and how the rest we need, the breaks we need. Taking naps are a good thing. It's not bad. But I don't like to advertise, well, I guess I just did, that I take naps. I do. So if I'm tired, how much productivity am I going to get through? And if I power down coffee, I'm not going to sleep, and I'm going to be tired again. Like, it doesn't work. I think it's time to start working with our bodies, in terms of recognizing when you work best. Yep. Also, I like to work, actually, apparently all of our brains are better in the morning. So if you have something strategic you need to do, something that is going to take more brain power, do that first. Even if it's the hard thing, even if it's the big project, work on that first. Right. And then later in the day, take breaks. They call it attention residue. When you can't shift quickly from one task to another. So don't think you can check email and then get right back to what you're working on, because you got attention residue for the 20 things that just came through. Right. And the last tip, the thing that really has worked for me over the years, is I got a card early on when I started coaching from a coach in Philadelphia. I can't remember her name. I wish I could, but I got a card that said, is this the best use of my time? And that simple question, hanging on my desk, was always just this touchstone to come back and be like, wait, am I working on the most important thing? Because we have more time than we realize. And I think, unfortunately, we're not always working on the best use of our time. And that's why we feel so scattered or so unaccomplished or so deflated at the end of the day. You got to feel like you did something really important that day. And asking yourself, what's the best use of my time, get you there. Yeah, and it seems like we tend to do all the little things that don't matter, right? And you're saving that big thing for later. Email, and then later. I blame email. And checking email first thing in the morning, all of a sudden my agenda's gone and it's what everybody else said. But that, again, you bring it back to what's the best use of my time. And what are your priorities, and it really makes a difference. I'm with you there, though, I try not to, first thing in the morning, open email. I try to do a project first. If I have something I need to do, and then an hour later, check the email. Meditation, too. I find meditation in the morning helps. I'm sure we'll hit on this in other articles. Yes, absolutely. In important areas. But it helps the important inspired stuff bubble to the surface, so that I've already had my agenda sort of formed before email hijacks it. So I do that when I exercise too. It's usually one of those things. It's meditative. Where, it is. And I start thinking about what's going on during the day, and sometimes the best ideas come out while I'm on a run or and it can save you time. It can save you energy. There's a lot of things I think are really at our fingertips. We just have to allow for them in our schedules. Right. So when I look at you, and I've known you for a while, but I think of somebody living this wonderfully bold life. What does living a bold life mean to you? Well, I'll tell you, I think the number one thing is being defined by my own measure of success. It's been a long road. I started off as the overachiever who, checked all the boxes in high school and got almost straight A's in college. I checked, and then there's a lot of folks out there, we compare ourselves to other people. Right. We go after things that don't end up actually making us happy, which is where the lack of meaning and purpose come from. So I've really taken a long road to get there, but to define my own meaning of success has been the boldest thing I've done. And then because of that, I've made different choices to embark into coaching. When I was a management consultant, my parents thought I was crazy because they had never heard of this coaching thing. And how can you support a New York City apartment on that? And are you going to be moving in with us? All kinds of fears. But ultimately, taking that first step and starting to embark on what I felt was most important has led to opportunities like the radio show, which is now the podcast, meeting people like you. I mean, it's just this path that's there for you, but you have to be the first one to take that step. And oftentimes it's going to mean making different choices than perhaps the people around you might think are the right ideas.
Yeah.
But if you know in your heart, in your mind, and you've researched and you really feel strongly that this is the right path, that kind of soul search and research makes a different job search in terms of the action steps you take.
So is it the responsibility of a coworker or a boss, or is the responsibility on oneself to find satisfaction in a job?
It's an interesting question, because a lot of times we do blame our boss, right? Or coworkers. I've heard that. I need to get out. My boss is driving me crazy. But what does often happen is that people I was creating the same patterns at different employers. So it didn't matter if I changed jobs or changed careers, I was still finding myself in the same place. So then I had to look internally. So it does rest, the responsibility does rest with the individual to get clear, again, on what's going to make them happy. When I was at Martha Stewart, I was Director of Learning and Development, and I created a career class. Because people are like, you're a coach, do that stuff here. All right. And the first question was, what is going to make your job better? What do you think needs to happen to make your job better? I didn't ask the manager to do it, I asked the employee to do it. And then I coached the managers of different teams. Do this kind of stay interview with your whole team. Right. Say, what could be done to make your job better? What ideas do you have for not only improving the work, but maybe adding more productivity? What would you like to see happen here?
Right.
And when I had managers do this, without they weren't committed to following through on these ideas, but it was just the ask, again, that situation where you create that communication. The manager said there were great ideas shared that we implemented, and all of a sudden, I didn't have to take care of the work. The work took care of itself.
Right.
Because the employees took responsibility for making it better, the manager supported them in that, and it was a completely different environment.
So it's not only on your boss or coworkers, it's on yourself as well.
That's right, and you have a lot of control and empowerment to actually make it better.
Maggie, I am so excited I had the chance to sit with you today, and I think some of your advice is just going to be something that the viewers can just run with right away. I mean, so I am just so thankful. Thank you so much for being here today with me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure, Donna, anytime.
Oh, this was great. Thank you.